Solving equations and inequalities. So this will be a review of solving equations. You focus mainly on this in Algebra 1, but I do want to just do a quick review so we have that foundation for it. Okay, so the first one we're going to look at is negative 2x plus 7 equals 6. Now I suggest writing these down. Okay, first step we want to do is we want to subtract 7 from each side. Alright, so then after we do that, we are left with negative 2x is now equal to 6 minus 7 is negative 1. Now to get x by itself, divide each side by negative 2. So that gets rid of the number in front. Now we have x by itself is equal to negative 1 divided by negative 2. When we do a negative divided by a negative, that gives us a positive number. 1 divided by 2, you can't do that. That's going to give you a decimal. So we want to keep it in fraction form, and our answer will be positive 1/2. And that's our answer. All right, now let's get a little bit harder. So now we have a fraction. So we have 1/3 x plus 4 equals negative 3. So again, the first thing I want to do is I want to get rid of this positive 4. So I'm going to subtract 4 on each side. That leaves me still with the 1/3 x is equal to negative 3 minus 4. And again, if you're struggling with negatives, that's fine. Use your calculator. Negative 3 minus 4 gives us a negative 7. Now in Algebra 1, your teacher might have said, now divide by the fraction. In Algebra 2, we don't do that. So here's how we're going to get rid of a fraction. Whatever this bottom number is, so in this case 3, that's what we're going to multiply each side by, because a fraction is just division. So to do the opposite, we have to multiply. So I'm going to multiply this side by 3, and then the other side by 3. What this does is it cancels out just the bottom of the fraction. So whatever number is on top, you still have. So we still have 1, x is equal to negative 7 times 3 is negative 21. Now if you can recognize that a 1 in front of the x, that's usually invisible, there's your answer of 1x equals negative 21. If you didn't recognize that, that's fine. You would divide both sides by 1, and you would still get x to equal negative 21. Okay, now remember to pause the video if you do have any questions or if I'm going too fast, and you can rewind it. All right, we're going to do 2 more. Well, we're going to do a few more, but here are 2 more that we're going to do. They do get progressively harder, so take a second and write these down, or pause the video to write them down. Okay, now we're dealing with variables. We have an x on each side of our equal sign. So this first one, we have an x on each side and we have a fraction. So the first thing I want to do is I want to multiply by the bottom number of the fraction to get rid of it. So multiplying this side by 3, I'm going to multiply everything over here on the other side by 3. Remember, all this does is cancel out the bottom of our fraction. So I still have 4x minus 3 is now equal to, here I have to distribute. So this 3 is being multiplied to everybody. So 3 times 3x gives me 9x plus 3 times 4 is 12. Now I want to get all of the x's on the same side. So what I do is I always bring the smaller number of x's over to the bigger side. So I'm going to subtract 4x. All right, that gets rid of there. So I still have this negative 3 is now equal to 9x minus 4x gives me 5x, and we just carry down the plus 12. Now it's similar to what we started with. So next we're going to subtract the 12. Get rid of that. We have negative 3 minus 12. Again, use your calculator if you need to. Gives us negative 15 is equal to 5x. Last step, divide each side by 5. And we get negative 3 to equal x. All right, there was a lot in that. But just as a quick recap, remember, anytime we have a fraction, we want to multiply by whatever's on the bottom. That gets rid of the fraction and leaves us with the number or the expression on top. When we have to distribute, remember it has to be distributed to everybody inside those parentheses. All right, let's look at our next one. We have 4x plus 1 equals 2 times 2x minus 6. So the first thing I want to do here is I see parentheses, I'm going to distribute. All right, so this 4x plus 1 did not change. I'm just going to keep that. 4x plus 1 is equal to, now 2 times 2x gives me 4x. 2 times negative 6 gives me negative 12. Okay, now I need to get all the x's together. So I'm just going to subtract 4x and then subtract 4x. All right, so that cancels that out. I still have my negative 12. Now over here I've got 4x minus 4x. Do not write 0x, because 0 times anything is still 0. And we do not even write 0 in Algebra 2. So what happens with 4x minus 4x, we get rid of all of those x's as well. And we are just left with 1. So now you have to ask yourself, does 1 equal negative 12? No, that's not a true statement. So for this particular problem, we have no solution. That is our answer. Now, on a side note, so I'm going to draw this a little squiggly. If after all of our work we got negative 12 to equal negative 12, that is a true solution. So we would say all real numbers as our answer, if that were to happen. So if we get the same thing on each side, all real numbers. If it's different on each side, no solution. So just keep that in mind. All right, now we're going to get into problems that have more than one letter to solve for. All right, in this first one, we have 4x plus 8y equals 16. And we want to solve for x. So we're going to get this x by itself. Just like before, we're going to get everything away from this x. So I'm going to start by subtracting 8y from each side. Okay, that gets rid of the 8y on that side. I'm left with the 4x is equal to, now 16 and a negative 8y. Those are two different terms. I cannot combine them. So that leaves me with 16 minus 8y. Now to get everything away from the x, divide everybody by 4. So everybody gets divided by 4. That cancels out. I'm left with x is equal to 16 divided by 4 is 4. Negative 8 divided by 4 is negative 2. And they still have the y. And that's our answer. So we're not always going to get one single number as our answer. We'll get a different expression, which is fine. All right, let's go through another example. So V equals L times W times H. So we don't even have any numbers in this one, but we want to get H by itself. So this one looks a little bit scary, but it's actually easier because length is being multiplied to width, which is being multiplied to height. So how do I undo multiplication? Well, I divide. So I'm going to divide both sides by the L and by the W. By the L and by the W. So that cancels out the L and the W that are with the H. V cannot be divided by L and W, so we just leave it. V over L W is equal to H. That's our answer. So we are going to have some of these in Algebra 2, but just be aware that when we are solving equations, a single number might not always be our answer, and that's okay. All right, these are going to be our last two, and they are different because we are now solving inequalities. And notice that our inequality is different from our equal sign, right? We've got these guys again. So we're going to solve and we're going to graph. So take a minute, copy down the problems, and draw yourself a number line like I have at the bottom. Okay. We solve inequalities the same way that we solve equations. So I'm going to solve for this x. First thing I want to do is subtract 12 from each side. And that leaves me with 3x is less than or equal to 15 minus 12 is 3. Then I'm going to divide each side by 3. And that leaves me with x is less than or equal to 1. I'm going to hold off on graphing for a minute. So just right now we're solving. Okay, let's go over to the second problem. So 2 minus 4x is greater than 10. So again, I need to get x by itself. So I'm actually going to start by subtracting this 2. All right, it's a positive 2. I need to subtract it. That leaves me with a negative 4x greater than 10 minus 2, which is 8. And then I'm going to divide each side by negative 4. Now, remember back to Algebra 1, anytime you divide or multiply by a negative number, something happens to this sign. So since we are dividing by negative 4, that leaves me with x, we have to flip our sign. And then 8 divided by negative 4 is negative 2. So that's the key, is you need to flip the sign if you multiply or divide by a negative. And in this box in the middle, I'm actually going to write that in my things to remember. So I make a little bullet point, and I'm going to say flip sign when multiply, and I'm just going to shorten that to multiply, or divide by a negative, and I'm going to shorten that word, so neg for negative number, and I'm just going to write num. So that's one thing I want to remember when I'm solving for them. Okay, now let's shift back to this first one. We're going to graph this inequality now. So I have the solution of x is less than or equal to 1. When I'm graphing them on a number line, here are the things I want to remember. So I'm going back to my box. If I have a symbol that looks like these, less than or equal to, or greater than or equal to, I'm going to use a closed circle. And if I have a symbol or an inequality that looks like this, less than or equal to, less than or greater than, I'm going to use an open circle. Okay, so looking at this, problem over here. We had x is less than or equal to 1. So I'm going to find the number 1 on my number line, and I'm going to draw a closed circle because it is an equal to symbol. And what this is saying is x can be anything that is less than or equal to 1. So I need to draw an arrow to include all of those numbers. So I ask myself, is 0 less than 1? Yes. So I'm just going to draw an arrow, and I'll shade everything underneath. And that is how I graph. So that means anything in the shaded area can be a solution to this inequality problem. Now let's do it again on the second one. So I have x is less than -2. So I'm going to go to -2. I'm going to do an open circle. And I want to shade where everything is smaller, where it's less than -2. Is 0 smaller than -2? No. So I'm going to shade away from the 0. So that was just a quick overview and a reminder on how to solve equations, how to solve inequalities, and how to graph inequalities from Algebra 1.